Hello and welcome in this new broadcast that we're making in the podcast series where we talk with people around the world who are working to promote peace. And currently today, we are mainly focused on what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Palestine and Israel. And I think it's very urgent that people understand what's really going on. And therefore, I'm really glad that today I can talk to Rawad Yonus. He's a Palestinian from Syria originally, and an academic. Rawad just studied neuroscience, cognitive neuroscience in Sweden, and did a master in philosophy of ethics, and has the intention of continuing his studies with a PhD. Rawad, I think I'm very grateful that you want to be here and talk to us about the situation in Gaza. Maybe let's start with a little bit about yourself. I think it's very already good to start with a little bit of your family background, because you are from Syria originally. But of course, how did your family end up in Syria in the first place?
Yes, hi Jakob, thank you very much for having me. I'm very glad actually that there is a voice of peace coming out during these hard times that we are experiencing right now. And I'm talking to you with a completely broken heart because of what's going on to my people in Gaza. We're literally witnessing and experiencing a genocide. And I want to really appreciate the opportunity here. So yes, my background. So my parents are Palestinian, so I'm originally a Palestinian. My grandfather comes from a city called Haifa on the Palestinian coast on the Mediterranean, and my grandmother comes from Jaffa, another Palestinian city on the coast also. They were the ones among the people, among the Palestinians who were expelled from their homes and what's happened in 1948. The Palestinians were expelled into the neighboring countries at that time. So some went to Lebanon, some went to Jordan, some went to Syria. My grandparents have chosen to go to Syria for some reason or another. For years, they lived in UN facilities such as schools and mosques and other areas here and there until a certain point. We were granted, or we had an area that later on was called Al Yarmouk camp. It's a camp where the overwhelming majority of Palestinians live in Syria. So my parents lived there, and then my father and my mother traveled to the United Arab Emirates, Abu Dhabi. And I was born there, me and my four brothers and sisters. And we lived there for 10, 11 years. And of course, I was living at that point, me and my parents as stateless people. Of course, we were not granted a citizenship. And after 11 years of living there, because I believe both economic difficulties, my father has chosen to go back to Syria. We lived there in Syria for another 11 years. And then the war started in Syria. We were able to sustain ourselves for a couple of years during the war. And at a certain point, my father has decided that we have to leave the country. And then we moved. Since then, we migrated to Europe, specifically Sweden. And we have been here for the last 10 years. Since then, I was granted a citizenship, which I appreciate much. And also I focused on my studies. I did a bachelor in cognitive neuroscience and a PhD, a master's in philosophy of ethics, applied ethics. And as you mentioned, the intention is to continue my research and do a PhD that focuses on both philosophy and neuroscience.
Thank you very much. I think the reason why I started this question with the background of your family is because what people do not realize is that the Palestinians are still the largest group of refugees living in the world. People and this also one of the longest existing group of refugees. So you spent part of your youth in Yarmouk camp, a place inside Damascus, which started as a real camp and later turned out into more of a neighborhood, specifically for Palestinians. And yeah, maybe some people remember that also as part of the war in Syria, Yarmouk was, I think, also totally destroyed in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. A similar destruction that we see now in Gaza taking place, with a big difference that people in Gaza cannot leave. Can you tell a little bit about what you see, how you experienced the past weeks?
Oh, I would say it's incomprehensible. This is what's going on as a psychological shock. I believe it's not only for me. I believe to everyone who watch any videos that came out of that area. I think I think the world, like as we used to talk about the world before COVID and after COVID, we will talk about the world before this genocide and after this genocide. I actually barely can put my words together to describe what's going on over there. We're talking, until this point, we are at the 30th of October, we're talking about over 3,000 children dying. I mean, I'm bombarded with visions of 3,000 skulls, children's skulls above each other, making mountains. Over 2,000 women died. People are starving. People have no water, no electricity, and in the last 3 days, cut off communication from the world. I don't know how to make sense of all of this. I really can't. I mean, we are used as Palestinians, and of course, people who lived in the Al Yarmouk, but all over the world, we're used to what called modern Israel now, or government of Israel, to commit a massacre every now and then, like on an average of, I don't know, 7, 8, 10 years to commit a massacre. But now their ambition is rising to really, really scary numbers. And I'm trying to calm myself down as much as I can, uh, stay on my feet, try to encourage the people around me in any way, because people are devastated and terrified. People are scared. Even people here in Europe, by the way, are scared of even making a post about it. Are scared to express their pain through art or protesting in the street or something like this. It's an absolutely horrible condition that's taking place now.
I will ask you about the situation in Europe later also, but I think it's really important what you say about the numbers, because I just looked up the numbers of the first Nakba, what people know as the first ethnic cleansing operation by Israel. That had to do with moving 750,000 people out of their homes, killing around, I don't know if you have different numbers, but I read it was about 15,000 people. That was over a period of 2 years. And now we see a number that is more than half of those people not killed. Estimations are with between 8 and 10,000 people now. It's more than half of the Nakba, and it is taking place within 3 weeks. I think it's absolutely chilling, and I'm as shocked as you are. And people keep denying this. How do you see that in Sweden? What is your reaction in Sweden among the general population?
Yes. When it comes up among the general population, I actually here in Sweden we hold really high values when it comes to peace, liberation, freedom, and tolerance. Most of Swedish people actually hold such values. However, I was like completely shocked by our government here taking the bias to with Israel, especially in the early days of the war. And as another thing, something else, which is, I mean, mind blowing for me, that Swedish people are also scared to speak up. It's not like they are in denial. It's not like the media is just misleading them. They actually also Swedish people are afraid of them. Actually, one of them got in touch with me in private. Someone who I hold as an ideal. She used to be my teacher, and she spent the 70s and part of the 80s as a warrior for women and women's rights, as a feminist. She knows what oppression means, and I can read between the lines her fear of what's going on and not being able even to express her opinion about it. This is actually remarkable. However, at least Sweden, in comparison to other Western countries, they allowed for a little bit of protesting here and there under certain circumstances and conditions, but at least they allowed for people to express their pain. I mean, you can't just oppress people's pain that much. That will just cause really horrible consequences, I believe.
But the government in Sweden is in. How did they vote in the UN? Did they vote in favor of the resolution for a ceasefire or not?
Yes, yes, they did.
Okay. Well, our government in the Netherlands, they abstained from voting, so that's also quite shameful, I think. Let's go back to how it got that far. What is your can you explain how it comes that certain that at this moment we see the level of destruction taking place and the West sort of endorsing the actions of Israel? I mean, start where you want to start, but what is your explanation for the fact that we suddenly are silent when it comes to seeing and watching war crimes taking place?
Yes, that's a very interesting and huge question. And the challenge of this question is, so where in history should we start from?
Yes.
And I will share my insights with you. I'm, of course, not a politician or have a degree in political science, but I think it's, for me, myself, actually, it goes, I think what's going on right now is that we're still suffering the consequences of the colonial era.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the Palestinian situation in particular here. Since the mandate of British colony to Palestine and the Balfour Declaration in 1917, and granting this area for Zionist Jews, is a good point of history where we can go back to.
Yes.
Yes, and a massive injustice took place in 1947, 1948, under the claim that the Jews, motivated by Zionist ideology, have the historical and the religious right for the land, which is, I find it a very invalid argument all the way, and I'm very happy to explore the invalid aspect of the argument. Like, the first aspect is that God has granted this land for us. The problem with that, which God should we believe? Like, and what about modern gods? That's a problem here. Another problem, which is at what point in history you can go back and say, all right, this land belongs to these people, not these people. There has been people before the Jews in the land. Now the question is, do the Jews have a claim to the land? The answer is yes, but it's one among many claims. And the fact that you have a claim for something doesn't mean that you come with machine guns and shoot people in the streets, punch farmers and village people and expel them from their lands. That's absolutely inappropriate. And so a large injustice has taken place since at that point. And even if we
can we so let's go back to 1947, 1948, 1949 maybe. Of course, we know that there was this partition plan by the UN proposing to create two states, a Jewish and a Palestinian state. What had happened before that time? You know, what was what? I mean, your family are from Haifa and Jaffa, I think. Those are ghost cities that are currently as Israeli as the rest of the coastal areas are, except for Gaza. What happened there before that time, before the actual declaration of independence of Israel?
Yes, that's a very good question, and I wish I am a historian to give you an accurate answer to this question. However, some of what I have learned, that the Jews have already owned something like 60% of the land at that point. The Palestinians were the overwhelming majority of the land there. The Jews were having a really, really hard problem in Europe because of the Nazi and the Second World problem, which is really a terrible tragedy that the Jews and other people had to go through. And at a certain point, the way that I believe that what took place there is that the British colony was replaced with another colony by the Jewish people. It was a great investment, I believe, for the British and the whole Western world. It's a great investment there. And for some reason, they declared this. They were motivated with this Zionist idea that we're going to go back to our land. God has granted this land to us. It's a very appealing idea, actually, that people who have been devastated by the Nazi machine war into ashes, and then they have been resurrected. They have the archetype of the phoenix, right? They have been resurrected. They have taken the new land that they started from zero. And it has similarities also of how the US has started also. People who started from zero and God gave them the land. And the same thing almost happened. The only difference is that the Zionist Jews at that point in Israel, they didn't kill everyone or the majority of the people. And I have the sense that they are regretting this now and they're correcting that mistake by what they are doing right now. But it has this appealing idea, very appealing idea, as if justice has been granted for the Jewish people. They have resurrected their language and religion and people and so forth and so on. So that's one of the reasons why it's very appealing for the people in general.
That's like the moral appeal for people that still sort of is very popular among Europeans. They are still sort of repeating the lie, about the people without a land to a land without a people. That's the
Yeah, exactly. It's one of the myths. Yeah, it's one of the
yeah.
myths about the topic that the land was like no one was there and then we just came there. It's the same problem, same colonial mentality.
Yes. So after 48, like I know people are saying then as a sort of reproach towards Palestinians, some people are saying it was a partition plan, but you refused sort of to start the Palestinian state there. And then what is an explanation for that?
Well, that's a very good question. The Jews or the Zionist Jews, first of all, people have suffered injustice and no justice was established for the people, right? For the Arab people or the Palestinians at that point. But that partition plan gave the majority of the land, like over 50%, I think it was like 56% of the land to the Israeli people, and the rest is for the Palestinian people. And that wasn't a fair deal, I guess. And they entered the war. The neighboring countries, the neighboring Arab countries for Palestine attacked actually the Zionists at that point. And it was a horrible war, of course. At that point, even Zionist Israelis took over more land of the Palestinians.
Yeah. What are other relevant moments in history that people should be aware of after 48?
After 48, well, many massacres took place between 48 and the 60s. And then there was the war in 67. I think it's a very relevant war, which also led for the loss of the Arab this war. They lost this war, and that led to the expansion of Israeli settlers. At that point, I think it's fair to say that at that point, Zionist Israelis took around 80% of the land. And there, where we have clear what's referred to at that point, West Bank and the Gaza Strip. That's a very, very important point in history that took place until I believe the war in 73. And of course, Israel went beyond the borders of Palestine in 67. They took the Egyptian Sinai deserts and they took the Golan Heights or mountains in Syria. In 73, another war took place, and as a consequence of this war, the Egyptians took back their part that has been taken. Of course, Syria didn't, and nor the Lebanese. There's land also occupied by Israelis from Lebanon, Shaba area, and what I was about to think of is yes, the 73 was the consequences of that war, and then until the 80s, I guess, the massacre that took place against the Palestinians in Lebanon, inside Lebanon, was a horrible, horrible massacre. I mean, some historians, well, the official knowledge that we have, information that we have, that it's around 3,000 people who died there. Of course, we're talking about the Palestinian leaders at that time in exile, mostly refugees, were taking sanctuary in Lebanon, and a massacre called Sabra and Shatila. You can look this up. But other historians talk about even something close to 20,000 people who died, mostly civilians. That was a horrible time in history in this conflict. And then we see the first Intifada, which is referred to Al-Hijara Intifada, or the stone Intifada. And the word Intifada comes from the Arabic origin Nafda, which means rising up. So the people in West Bank and the people in Gaza declared some kind of, like, uprising and facing Israel in the streets, mostly actually non-violent. It was non-violent. Yes, of course, people would say violent because some children throw stones here and there on some military vehicles, but in general, the intention, I believe, was completely violent. But the reaction was like 20 to 1 Palestinian dead, 20 Palestinians to 1 Israeli Palestinians were murdered. And then we have the Oslo agreement that took place, where at that point, what was referred to at that time, the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, after one defeat after another, after one massacre after another, they actually recognized Israel there as a state. But did Israel hold themselves to the agreement? Of course not. There has been more expansions of settlers taking more land and more land, which again was very provocative to the Palestinian people until the second Intifada took place in early years of the 20th century. I think it was initiated when, at that point, the Israeli leaders, Ariel Sharon, visited the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is considered a very, very holy place for Muslim people. And that was a sign of disrespect for the Muslim people and the Arab people. And there was where was the second Intifada. And in the second Intifada, we find a different approach from the Israelis than the first Intifada, where they really went all on with violence. Like, people talk about crazy numbers of ammunition have been used just in the first 3 days. They don't want to repeat what happened in the first Intifada. They wanted to just burn it in the beginning of it, And yes, at that point, some people make the claim that the ratio of death moved down from 20 to 1 to 6 to 1. I'm sorry that I'm putting all of this in just abstract numbers. Of course, these are souls, these are people that are dying, but just for the sake of the discussion. There where we find the uprising of Hamas as a resistance force in Palestine, particularly in Gaza, because the resistance there at that point in West Bank, which has a more of a left-leaning bias, after, of course, the death of the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat. Of course, they surrounded him in his home, until the last days of his life. Then he made a deal, got him out, went to the hospital, died in obscure circumstances, blah, 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 blah. Of course, the same story. He is a terrorist, should die, blah, blah, blah. Dehumanization of the other. Same story again and again. At that point, the resistance, which has a more or less a left-leaning bias, was completely devastated and was replaced, that government or that leaders was replaced of what I would call a puppet government led by today what's a figure called Mahmoud Abbas, who doesn't represent the Palestinian people in any way. And I'm willing actually to make this claim very well. However, Hamas, since the second Intifada, started taking this approach of resistance with violence. This occupation, these people don't understand the language of nonviolence. They lived under humiliations, undescribable humiliations, and they were treated exactly how their spokesmen are talking to Israeli people. They treated the Palestinian people. I'm reluctant actually to use some of these terminologies, but we were described as animals who were described as even less than animals. I don't know what that is. An insect, you can smash an insect. What about less than an insect? I'm not so sure at all. So yes, and humiliation. And so the people in West Bank and in Gaza, particularly in Gaza, they have a couple of options in their life until they die at any moment, which is either you get arrested and get exposed to really horrible, and I'm using a subclinical term here, sadistic approach in their tortures. We have some documentations about that, about the way that they torture their prisoners inside the Zionist Israel. And also, you have another option: wait for a year or two, then Israel will come and bomb here, and you will die. Yeah. So as long as I'm going to die, so I have nothing to do but to make use of this somehow. So there where we start to see Palestinians resorting to actually extreme measures in the resistance. So what took place in the 7th of October, it was actually surprising for me for multiple reasons. I'm very willing to focus on that if you would like to. But the Palestinians have resorted to extreme measures in their defense for a long time. For example, there has been a period where people would explode themselves, the Palestinians, just go there and just explode themselves with a group of soldiers here or there. They are exposed to humiliation. They have this policy that has been spoken about in one of Joe Rogan episodes with, I think, an activist. Her name is Abby Martin, if I'm not mistaken, an American activist. I'm very happy that she's still safe. I'm very happy that she survived being in Palestine, because there was another Palestinian American activist. I think her name is Rachel Corrie or Corey.
Rachel Corrie.
Yeah, I forget my pronunciation. She was murdered there in a really, really terrible way. And I'm very happy for her survival. And she talks about, for example, a policy that the Israeli has, which is shoot to cripple, that they might shoot you in sensitive sexual areas. Yeah, so the Palestinians have resorted to these extreme measures for a while now. And we're witnessing right now, since the 7th of October, a new era in this conflict, how the Palestinians are responding to what's going on, that has been going on for the last 75 years.
So you've actually also explained how it comes that something like Hamas has grown to be so powerful and violent as it is at the moment. Because you say you've mentioned like a lot of things, like a lot of massacres that happened during let's say the official existence of the Israeli state in Palestine. Not only at the start, but at many forced displacements, many slow incursions into and actually the war on the West Bank and Gaza, but also incursions, land theft, those kind of things. But also you mentioned the very cruel slaughter of the refugee camps, Shabra and Shatila in Lebanon. You've mentioned the Intifada, during which also many Palestinians were killed. And actually, what's interesting in what you say is that formerly the resistance of Palestinians was formed around sort of a leftist resistance movement, the PLO. And actually, you explain the rise of something like as violent as Hamas and oriented around more religious ideas, to the fact that the leftist resistance was effectively destroyed by Israel. Is that true?
Yes, I believe so. I believe so. It was completely crushed, actually, the leftist resistance, and I would say completely bought by Israel.
Yeah.
And that's allowed for the second side of the continuum actually to rise and do something about what's going on.
Because I see personally, and I find it a bit tragic also, in the streets, when people protest, and people do protest here. There are many protests in the Netherlands, and many people are feeling, anger and frustration. But at the same time, on social media and on the talk show programs on television, and our politicians, they have to say they have to first denounce Hamas. That's the first thing.
Yes.
And there's no context around this. There's no, Hamas is like this ultimate evil terrorist group, I mean, I have to be clear. I also denounce killing of civilians, etc. But we are now it started how many more than 2 weeks ago? Is it already 3 weeks? Like more than 2 weeks ago, we started. We saw this massacres by Hamas, but we've moved on, and in the meantime, 8,000 more than 8 to 10,000 civilians have died, and we still keep talking about Hamas now. And what do you think about that?
Yes, a very sensitive question, actually. Yes, so we are obsessed right now in the media that you have to condemn Hamas as a terrorist organization, and it's just another style of dehumanizing the other and giving a moral justification for the death. And I have to say, first of all, I am against death in violence in any way. Actually, unless it's a really, really extreme situations, I try to be as passive as I can when it comes to violence. Now, but I'm actually disgusted of this aspect where people are obsessed with condemning Hamas, because what you're asking me to do is to give a moral justification for a genocide. And I think this is very manipulative and a very disgusting approach. If you are taking the humane part here, you could ask me if I have any sympathy for the victims who died from the Israeli side. And I have to say, I have all the sympathy for anyone who is suffering from this war, an Israeli or a Palestinian, even soldiers, whatever. I don't care. I don't care what's their background. I don't care if they brought this to themselves or not. I don't care. I am a human being, and I stand on compassion and sympathy and justice. This is to start with. Now, when it comes to what happened there in the 7th of October, particularly, actually, I was surprised for many reasons. One of which is, first of all, I was completely surprised with this claims that there has been beheading of babies and rape. Now, I don't hold too much of religious values in my life, not that much at least, but I know the Palestinian people. They would never do such a thing. I know that for sure. I'm speaking from a subjective point of view here. All right. I know they would never. I didn't believe it. I didn't believe the beheading of babies. I didn't believe the rape thing. A Palestinian person would never do such a thing for the most part. Of course, we all have some people who commit some horrible stuff. Now, do I condemn the killing of the civilians? Of course, without question about it. And I believe that even Hamas leaders should speak for themselves for the murder of innocent civilian people. However, the more time is passing from that time, the more lies are being exposed from what happened in the 7th of October. I mean, we have the president of the US, a superpower, claiming and lying to people on live TV, talking about seeing pictures of beheading babies. I mean, what's the problem? I mean, what's going on with you, like, right? And not only him, actually, some figures such as former Dr. Jordan Peterson went immediately to this lie. He was fooled by this lie and went like, give him hell. I think he got what he wanted. I guess maybe it's worse and he wants more. I don't know. And yes, I feel very sorry for what's going on in both sides. I believe both are suffering not only from the 7th of October. I think they are suffering from the start of this conflict, from the beginning of this conflict. Yes.
Yeah. So I didn't want you to sort of apologize for that. I just wanted to mention that I found it so absurd that people keep stressing Hamas without understanding what Hamas is and how Hamas came into existence, and without telling the truth about what's going on, what went on the on 7th of October, and also while ignoring everything that happened after, and actually, indeed, as you say it, using this as an excuse to commit genocide. I'm utterly abhorred by it, actually, and shocked that it can that it. And I see a similar also reflects now at the moment. Now it's not only Hamas, which is the talking point, but and I don't know what you think about it, but it's also anti-Semitism. Like the politicians that sort of are very politicians and media figures who are sort of now actually sort of I don't know how do you say it? Like this is a huge rise of anti-Semitism that gets huge articles in the news now. And of course, anti-Semitism is bad. I think we can agree with that, But personally, I see this very much as a distraction of what's actually taking place. I don't know, how do you see that?
It's a manipulation. I agree with you totally. It's actually another manipulation.
It's like
Zionism
gaslighting,
actually,
it's gaslighting. If you say something about Gaza, then you're an anti-Semite, no? I mean,
exactly, exactly. It's very cheap. It's very manipulative. It's very clear for any reasonable person to see through it. However, if you are one of those who are enjoying what's going on in Gaza right now, if you really like what you're seeing, then no reason will help you at all, and you don't need even any kind of propaganda to justify your position there. And I have to say, if there are some people who are enjoying what they're watching, we have to be very clear about this. Maybe I don't have a background in clinical psychology, but my background in cognitive neuroscience and studying the personality, the psychology of personality. We know that we have all some dark triads, and one of them quite recently was included into the dark triad, which came to become the dark tetrad, sadism, as a distinct category, actually. And I really believe that the voice of peace should uprise this voice and this tendency. It should uprise it. And we should not be fooled by such absurd and ridiculous claims and accusations. This is just ridiculous and absurd, and any reasonable person would be able to see through it if you know where you stand morally about what's going on here.
yeah, it's true what you say. If you know where you stand morally, then there's. But the point is that I'm quite shocked by the fact, by the to have to conclude that so few people are able to do that. Are so few. I mean, there were polls in the Netherlands that showed actually that the majority of the Netherlands want a uh, more active engagement of the Dutch government towards Israel. So that gives me really hope. But the voices that are most loudly present in both politics and media, they are still the voices that are, I mean, you have to talk about psychology indeed. The voices to whom the ethical or the moral is that be just being touched in the heart by the seeing the massacres taking place. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't get to the skull somehow. It doesn't. So and they keep it goes further than denial. It goes even towards accusing the victims of being terrorists, accusing the victims of being
Yeah,
anti-Semites, trying to block free speech, trying in our parliament. There's a resolution sort of forbidding the saying from the river to the sea, and forbidding even there's an there were even trying to forbid to say free Palestine, because then those kind of things. So um I don't know. I don't know what to make
yeah.
of it.
I
Yeah,
love,
yeah.
I love to help you here a little bit. Like, we know from personality psychology that there is a positive correlation. I'm not affirming a causation here. That there's a positive correlation between traits such as narcissism, sadism, psychopathy, and people who have careers as politicians and also other careers, actually, like surgeons and others. But we're speaking about politicians particularly. I'm not saying that doesn't mean that every politician has these traits, but that means that if you have these traits, the possibility of you becoming a politician is higher than anyone else. So somehow, what the average person, quotation marks, their sense of sympathy, their sense of empathy, their sense of compassion and altruism are not the same as a person who is low in the trait agreeableness and high in traits such as narcissism, sadism, and psychopathy. So it's not like you're going to convince them. It doesn't exist even in their consciousness at all. It's not part of their subjective experiences at all. But the solution for that is that we people in the streets, we should have a voice louder than that voice, no matter how they are manipulating the media and the truth and all of that. Most of us people are sympathetic towards each other. Most of us are peaceful with each other. We just want to live a normal life, have a cup of coffee together and have a laughter before going to sleep. Most of us want to have just a peaceful, simple, basic life. But warlords and politicians and power-seeking people and that grandiosity, that they don't want that. They actually don't want that. And I really want to belong to the people who want to raise their voice against that voice, even if it sounds ridiculous, even if it sounds hopeless. It's not. It's really not. I really don't believe it's not.
Okay, go. Let's go that direction then, because many people are on the verge of becoming hopeless. And I think I 100% agree that we shouldn't. We have no right to be hopeless. Also, if you see the people in Gaza surviving, it should also inspire us to go on. So, what would your approach be? I mean, what's taking place? We see many demonstrations. Is that enough, or what should we do? What would your approach be?
Yes, I can't claim that I have an accurate answer here or a satisfying answer. However, I have some insights that I'm very happy to share with you and the viewers.
Please.
I would like, first of all, to point out that there is a religious aspect to what's taking place here from both sides, and not only Islam and Judaism, even Christianity is involved in this conflict in one way or another. I could imagine in an ideal world where figures from each of the monotheistic religions meeting together and trying to find a solution for this. I mean, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. I would like to see people from these three religions are praying together, you know, for what's going on over there. I would like to see, you know, people who are pacifists from both sides, the Israeli side and the Palestinian sides, protesting together all over the world, calling for peace, not only ceasing fire, calling for peace. That will change the public opinion. I would like to see the people in Europe and the US pressuring their government actually to at least do something when it comes to the diplomatic relationships with Israel. I mean, you know, taxpayers right now in the US particularly are contributing to what's going on here. And I'm not interested in blaming people at all, actually, or guilt tripping people. That's a mistake that people are falling into, both in Europe and even in the Arab world. People feel hopeless. People feel guilty. These emotions are somehow understandable to be uprising in such a situation, but I would recommend avoiding these emotions. They are not significant here. You don't need to feel guilty to do something here. You don't need to feel at all guilty or hopelessness, to give in to hopelessness for this. There's always something that can be done. We shouldn't be living in a time where we're allowing for this to happen. A genocide taking place. Some people are being silenced in the streets, in the media. The news are being manipulated. The information are being manipulated. We are saying yes to a worse circumstances that's going to take place in the future. And as a Palestinian, I could say also, we have lived this intimidation before. We have lived this hopelessness before. Don't give in to it. There's always something that can be done. Always. Don't give up.
Thank you. Very powerful words. What you say about don't try to be guilt tripping people. I have the urge very often to show politicians the images of children being murdered. That is guilt tripping, I guess. But
well, don't worry about this part. If you're showing politicians, most of them they're not gonna feel guilt. So no worries there.
yeah, no,
No
no.
worries there.
But no, I see. But like, I mean, not. I'm just wondering. I agree what you say. We have to put pressure. We have never to lose hope. We have to get together. And I admire how you are being so, generous and, sort of even not, you don't blame that you say you don't blame, but I feel we need to blame somehow. Maybe that's not good. Maybe it's not a wrong urge or something, but how else could we,
Well, what we're doing right now is remarkable. First of all, we are reflecting on the truth. People are going through what I call a moral paralyzation. People are paralyzed. They don't know. It's a dilemma. It's a very complex dilemma. These are committing war crimes. They are committing war crimes. The
yes.
media is bombarding people. But try to go back to your own moral foundation, whatever it is. I'm not even advocating for people to take the Palestinian sides here. No, not at all. Take a position, take a moral position, go back to your morals, whatever they might be, religious morals, new age spirituality, secular liberal morals, whatever morals that you know yourself to uphold. Now is the time to stand on it. Sympathy is not enough. Empathy is not enough. These are good emotions, that's for sure, but you have to be able to reflect morally about what's taking place here. So you have to face the fear that's instilled inside of you and the responsibility. You have to take that responsibility. And I believe that at an individual level, you have to separate yourself from this duality where you have to draw the line between good people and bad people. Abstain from this, at least for now. We can deal with the conflict between Palestinians and Israelis later, but regarding the genocide that's taking place right now, while we're speaking, try to abstain from this duality that these are good people or these are bad people. The politicians and the media will just keep reinforcing this story all the time. No, what's happening right now, it's a genocide in the 21st century, and it will be a stain on our conscience for years to come. And it will have horrible consequences on all of us. That means that we're saying yes for this to happen there, and you don't know what the consequences of that silence in the near future.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's because one of the reasons why I was asking this question is, for instance, yesterday we had 2 massive demonstrations in the Netherlands, and one was in The Hague, where I live, the city of the government, and this was, you say, I don't like this phrase, but the pro-Palestine demonstration. It was actually a demonstration which, under the name "Stop Dutch Complicity in Genocide." Yeah, that was the sort of the. And in Amsterdam, there was also a big demonstration. However, that demonstration was about peace, and that was about, bring no flags, there was no expression of any affiliation. And by myself, I think we represent a peace organization, and of course, we want dialogue, and we aim for, people talking to each other, and of course, we want to promote peace. However, in the situation of an ongoing genocide where people are complicit and are even, with their words, they're not shying away even to say that they support the actions of Israel. Like, which kind of demonstration would have your preference?
I think for now, for the genocide that's taking place, peace is fine, please. Peace is good. Pray for peace. Voice the peace out. We are bombarded with this news, with these pictures. Our nervous system is completely overloaded with these images. So it's some is with rage, some with vengeance, some with anger, some with all of that negative emotions. So I don't think it's healthy right now to choose a side. No, go for ceasefire, go for peace right now. That would be my voice and my place right now. Later on, you can decide and reflect on who's bad and who's good and who you would like to, represent or defend.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we have to stop here, Rawad. I think we could have been talking about a lot of different points, and both the psychological aspect of what's taking place at the moment and the concrete historical and philosophical consequences of what's actually going on. For now, I would like to thank you very much for your story and for your insights. And I take a lot of inspiration from people like you who remain calm and contained in a situation of utter inhumanity and dehumanization. I think you're a great example, and I would like to thank you very much for your contribution.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, yeah, let me say, I hope we can continue our discussion maybe in a later moment, and see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you, Jakob, for the opportunity. Forward, ever forward with peace.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.